before you shoot, if you want to go in the bathroom there and go down to the end, you'll see the Titanic going down.
Okay. Okay.
I painted it a few days after the Titanic went down. They sent me the plans, and I drew the ship.
You just asked for the plans and they sent them?
Yes, I made it after the plans,
Uh-huh.
and they sent me a photograph of the ship.
Imagine that's nothing they were really very anxious to talk about, though.
Well, I think the Oceanic Steamship Company sent me all that stuff.
Oh, I see.
Their rival. They wanted me to paint a picture that rivaled it, if I cared to do it. And although several people have offered to buy it, I won't sell it. I like it. I don't need the money.
You were telling us about your paintings.
How I paint, I only use oils. When I was in college in Columbia University studying architecture, they made us use watercolors. But watercolors are difficult to handle because when you make a mistake, you can't change it. Why? With oils, you can scrape out what you do and do it over.
Uh-huh.
So I only paint oil painting, using oil paints. And the paints I use are all there in a line. And from time to time, painters will write and ask me what paints I use and all this and that. And so I tell them. But it doesn't do them much good unless they're good painters. It depends on how they paint and not what they use. And being a licensed architect, I paint a lot of architecture like that stuff you see here and there and everywhere. In fact, I was employed in the moving picture business to do the Cathedral of Notre Dame when that fat actor, who was a very good actor, but nobody liked him because he never took a bath and they didn't want to get near him. And the Cathedral of Notre Dame. But it wasn't called that, it was called something else, I can't remember.
Okay, well, one very logical question to ask is when you started painting, because that was before I was born.
When I was 5 years old.
And you were painting?
Lie on the floor and paint pictures of my grandmother, and my father came along and said, if I were you, I wouldn't show it to my grandmother. He didn't think much of it. But I always wanted to draw and paint, and I've kept at it.
So that's more than 90 years now.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll be 96 on New Year's Day, and I'm feeling fine.
Didn't you say once you were going to 104?
Didn't I say?
That you were going to 104?
I might have said that. But my grandfather made it to 98 and a half.
Uh-huh.
And my father made it to 95 and a half.
Oh, so good history there.
They had long lives. My mother died when I was 9 months old, but then she was at a yachting party and the yacht went overboard and she drowned. She caught pneumonia. She was saved, but she developed pneumonia and died when I was 9 months old. So she was Spanish and belonged to a Spanish musical family. So my American relatives brought me up. My father was a lawyer, ran for superior judge but didn't make it. And he and I never got along.
Uh-huh.
So we didn't communicate with each other after I went to New York and studied architecture in Columbia.
And you grew up in the San Francisco area?
I grew up
in San Francisco.
In San Francisco, but I lived 6 years in London and 15 years in New York, working for the magazines there. In fact, that picture you see up there is published in the New York newspaper, and it was the destruction of Egypt by some writer that it was the front page of the New York Times in color, and that's the original. He gave it back to me.
And you worked for your grandfather's paper?
He tried
company?
me out for 1 year, but found out that I was no businessman. I hated it. And I used to go to the art school at night and learned as much as I could there. But in those days, of course, it was necessary. They had to do everything in watercolor. And watercolor is very difficult because you make a mistake in watercolor and you can do nothing about it much. But when you paint in oils, you can scrape it off and do it over and all that. So I was painting oils.
Uh-huh. And you were a stock boy or something in the paper mill? The job you had in the paper mill?
My grandfather was in the wholesale paper business. He had 4 or 5 warehouses full of paper that was sold to various stationery stores and all that kind of thing. And my father was a lawyer, and he ran for superior judge, but didn't make it. And I'm in Kiev, Mexico, my mother being a Spanish Roman Catholic and my father being an American Unitarian, I became an atheist. I don't believe in heaven or hell or God, and we're just sophisticated animals. That's about it. And when you die, it's just a blackout. So criminals are not punished after death, as the church likes to make you believe.
Yes.
They just black out permanently. And when I was in Italy, I was impressed by going through an underground passage where there were literally millions of human skulls piled up on top of each other. And I asked the man I was with, I was his guest, where'd all those skulls come from? Was there a massacre? No, he said they died of the plague in the 12th century. And they did away with the bones, but they saved the skulls for some reason, some belief they had in it. There they were, still piled up, millions of them.
When did you do your first astronomical paintings?
When did I what?
Do your first astronomical paintings?
Oh, probably when I was 10 years old. I started to get very much interested in astronomy and tried my luck and studied astronomy. And Dr. Richardson, who was an astronomer down in Pasadena, was very kind to me and took me up Mount Wilson and the Lick Observatory, and I looked through the big telescopes and the 12-inch telescope, and he'd drive me around and explain everything to me. And one of the funny things was that he took me at night up on top of Mount Wilson, and we had dinner up there in the middle of the night. And when we came out, you wouldn't believe this, but there was a whole line of raccoons, and they were just standing there waiting because the astronomers would throw them bits of food that were left over, and they'd grab it. And they were very friendly. Now, we have raccoons around here that appear once in a while, but they used to be friendly, but they're not anymore because we don't feed them.
Now, you used to get passes to the train to Mount Hamilton, Lick Observatory?
You mean passes to go in?
No, to take the train to the base of the mountain, I believe you said once.
I did get a pass, but why, I don't know. I think I did something for the railroad, and they gave me, paid me in passes. Yeah, I think that was it.
And that's when the Lick Observatory was new, too.
That was...
When it was new, when the observatory was new.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you started painting...
Well, the Lick Observatory was fairly new, but it was pretty well established by that time.
Okay. Okay.
And the Mount Wilson Observatory, of course, is bigger. And they do more work there because it's less blotted out by the city lights the way the Lick Observatory causes trouble, that lights of the city.
Mm-hmm.
And the observation lights up the atmosphere in some way.
Okay, well you did your first astronomical paintings when you were 10. You say about 10.
About 10.
And do you remember what they were of?
I think Saturn was the planet that interested me the most because Dr. Richardson, who was one of the astronomers on there, showed me Saturn with the rings. And I thought it was so beautiful that I made a picture of that.
Uh-huh.
There's a painting in the back room made by the Japanese in there, but it's wrong. The Japanese, for some reason, although they're fine technicians, put bands through Saturn that don't exist. And Saturn I've looked at, and there's a picture of it downstairs you'll see over that English prayer desk that's mounted up. It's a beautiful picture of Saturn sent to me by the scientists down Pasadena. And it's practically pure yellow.
That was taken by one of the spacecraft?
Yes.
Was it?
Yes, this went by. And it's a beautiful reproduction. It shows the rings, but it's the underside of the ring, unfortunately, not the top side, which looks white.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the shadow side.
Mm-hmm.
But the rings are not solid.
Yes.
They're composed of circles of ice, small particles of ice.
And very cold, too.
Oh, everything's very cold out there. Nearly zero. So far away from the sun.
Well, have you been painting astronomical things since you were 10 then? The entire time?
Oh, yeah. I painted a lot of astronomical paintings. I painted a lot of stuff for the Boston Science Museum.
Uh-huh.
I painted a great big huge picture of, I forget what it was of. One of
The moon mural? The moon mural? Yes.
It might have been.
Yeah, sure.
They have it up there.
Well, it's in
But it was very big.
Washington now. 40 feet. Well, you mean the 40-foot moon mural?
Yeah.
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 Boston, isn't it?
Yeah.
Boston
Well, it
Science-
was. They took
Boston
it down.
Science
When
Museum.
they flew to the moon and they discovered what the moon looked like, they took it down and put up photographs of the moon.
I see.
And they gave it to the,
Well, all
gave it to
the
the,
previous pictures of the moon would
Yeah,
show
the Space
show
Museum.
mountains.
Yes.
When they got there, they found that everything had been blunted by meteors pounding it and pounding it. The meteors don't get through to us because they burn up before they hit. Only a few have gotten through, big ones. Most of them have been picked up.
Mm-hmm. I remember that. The books that you did that I was reading when I was young, showing the very jagged peaks, and no one had that right. Everyone was wrong on that. And that's, in retrospect, that's a bit of a surprise that a geologist didn't realize it, for example. The astronomers didn't have much experience in knowing what a planet would look like. But the geologists, you would think, would have known, but no one did. And craters on Mars is another one.
That was surprising.
Yeah, no one guessed
And
that.
the atmosphere of Mars was surprising. I painted pictures of it before they got there. I'd put a blue sky with a little sand drifting and wind, but I have photographs in there of Mars, and the sky doesn't show any blue at all.
Yes, it's pink. Pink because of the dust
Yeah.
in the air. Yeah. Do you remember when the first Mars photographs came back and they showed the craters? Do you remember that?
Yes.
And did you think,
I have a collection of the photographs they sent me when they first took them. They sent me all the stuff they took.
did you think wrong again when you saw those?
Well, I was pretty wrong.
By that time he was wrong so many times he gave up. Everybody had been so wrong.
Well, remember that at that time it was still being debated whether there was life on Mars because we thought the atmosphere was thicker than it is. And when the first pictures came back and it looked like the moon, then, well...
They didn't find any life when they tried to find some.
Yeah.
We just gave, you know, Don Davis.
Yeah.
He was here yesterday, and he already had that set of those long pictures of the first photographs from Mars
Yes.
by Viking. But we had a set. Chesley didn't want them anymore, so he said he could find somebody he could give them to. I gave them to him.
Did you watch the Apollo 11 moon landing?
Yes.
You mean the first one?
Yeah.
Yes, the first moon landing.
Oh, yeah.
Very interesting.
Chesley cried.
Which astronomers have you worked with through the years?
Well, Dr. Richardson was the first, and who else? I can't
Astronomer?
remember their
Dr.
names.
Weaver?
My memory would be
Harold
very
Weaver?
poor. Who?
Harold Weaver? Dr.
Yeah.
Harold Weaver.
And I know
It's hard to
a lot of
remember
them.
their names. He's known a lot of them, but I've forgotten their names.
You worked with Dr. Hubble, is that correct?
Yes, I knew him, and he told me a lot. Yes, I'm glad you mentioned him. He told me a lot of things about astronomy and made comments on some of my paintings and showed me some mistakes and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, he's one of the best known astronomers,
He
of
was
course.
a fine man.
Oh, Dr. Dodson?
After who?
Dodson? What was Dodson's first name? Dodson.
Oh, yeah.
What's his first name?
I forget,
He died.
as usual. Harold or something like that.
Harold?
It doesn't matter.
Did you know any of the astronomers from the early part of the century, like Dr. Shapley, for example?
No, I had his books or something. The name is very familiar.
He was
I didn't know him.
He was director of the Harvard Observatory
Uh,
for many years.
Dick Dodson. No, I don't think when Chesley didn't get to know any astronomers until he himself became better known for his space art.
Yes, this was,
So he didn't go into space art via the astronomers.
yes, yes.
He got known for his space art, then he consulted the astronomers.
This was when you were working for the movie studios that
He
you
was in Los Angeles.
met the astronomers mostly then?
well, when I was a kid, I walked with Richie Young to the top of Mount Diablo,
Yeah, but
26 miles,
Mount Hamilton. But
Mount Hamilton.
But you don't
And
even remember
on
the
Saturday
first
night,
time.
they allowed the public to look through the telescope. So I had to look through the 36-inch,
Mm-hmm.
and then later I looked through the 12-inch at Saturn. And that, of course, interested me in astronomy very much.
Yes. That's a beautiful sight.
Painting.
But when he was there, he doesn't even remember now which man was the director, for
Yes.
sure, because we've tried to figure it out with the history of Mount Hamilton,
Uh-huh.
and Chesley couldn't remember. He said he talked to some man who was awfully nice, but he just remember who he was. But he was pretty young then.
And you've worked with Dr. von Braun.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Werner von Braun was a great friend of mine. In fact, don't let me forget to show them that red book of Chesley Bonestell downstairs with the Werner von Braun's comments
I
in it.
think you've probably already seen it, but I'll show it to you again.
I enjoy seeing it though.
Yeah, you
It's fun.
Yeah, Werner von Braun said he feared me because of my criticisms. He was a fine man. It's too bad he died so early of cancer.
Yeah, too.
He was husky and big.
Uh-huh.
He had very fine features, almost like a girl, delicate hands. But he was very big and strong.
Now, how did you meet him?
How did what?
How did you meet Dr. von Braun?
I went to Huntsville, Alabama, I think for Collier's Weekly. Sent me down there. Was it Collier's or Harper's Weekly? Some magazine sent me
Collier's.
Collier's sent me down there.
Yeah.
And I met him down there in Huntsville. And we became great friends and saw each other frequently when he was living in New York.
Mm-hmm.
I think you met him at that convention in Texas.
You wouldn't think of him as being in the army, which you always think of a man looking tough and a fighter because he had very gentle features, and, small hands. He wasn't a husky-looking. He was big, but he wasn't the tough-looking guy you'd expect to see, with a protruding jaw and ready to fight. He was very gentle and very nice.
Well, of course, he was using his brain.
Yes, that's right.
So. And you met Arthur Clarke, I believe?
Oh yes, Arthur Clarke was a great friend of mine. He's living over there in that island that used to be called Greenland, or what was it? Not Greenland,
Ceylon. Ceylon.
Sri Lanka.
Ceylon, yes. And now he's living in Ceylon. That's changed its name to Sri Lanka.
Yes.
Something like that. And he was a great friend of mine. And,
Do you correspond?
oh yeah.
Occasionally. I think the
Once in a
first time
while.
that Chesley met him, actually, he came here with Bob, what's the man's name who lives up in Santa Cruz, up in the mountains? Bob,
Dodson?
no, up in Santa Cruz,
Santa Cruz.
who writes the science fiction? Come on, quick now. Bob, Robert Kline.
Oh, Heinlein.
Heinlein. Brought him here. He's more of a friend of Heinlein. And Chesley wanted him to write the text for the Beyond Jupiter. So he came here one day with the Heinleins, and they laid out the text, and then he wrote it. That's the only time that we've ever met.
I see.
But Heinlein disapproved of me because I told him his house looked like a gas station. he had a portico with two great white columns holding up the thing. And in the old days, at that time, gas stations were just like that. They had a big white thing. So he didn't like that, so we didn't speak after that. Yes, he got very annoyed. He lives in a valley way up there somewhere.
Does he live up in this part of the world?
Yeah, he lives
Oh yeah, he's in California. He lives up in
I see.
up in the mountains.
What is
Bonnie
that?
Dunes, the town
Bonnie Doon.
Bonnie Dunes.
Yeah.
I see.
And he, for some reason I never know, he has his place surrounded by a huge chicken wire kind of heavy fence
Cyclone fence. A cyclone
and
fence.
locks and closed. And I don't know what he's afraid of. I'm sure
Well, an
that
awful lot of
he's
people really believe the stuff he writes, and so he gets a lot of kooks coming after him, he says, so he had to close the place. Cyclone.
You mean he was annoyed by visitors?
Too many visitors, yeah.
I thought maybe he was afraid too many people would want to shoot him. He wasn't very nice.
Oh, he wants his very nice. You said that.
He was all right, but he had peculiar prejudices. He wouldn't do this. He wouldn't do that. No, he had a very positive, determined
Very
nature.
interesting house with a circular living room.
A circular living room.
A circular living room that goes around a big half circle. He designed it himself and has a fireplace in the center, or one side. And a long circular bench.
I'd say Dr. Robert Richardson was my greatest help in astronomy, and Arthur Clarke was next. And then followed several others that were always very helpful.
What astronomical subjects have you enjoyed painting the most?
Probably the moon.
Saturn, maybe? Saturn, maybe?
Saturn, but you can't do much with Saturn. There's the shadow of the planet on the ring. And because of the great distance, it goes into perspective something like a point. You'd expect it to be round, but it isn't. I almost said ain't, and I almost got scolded for using the word ain't when I was a kid. So I ain't going to say it.
We have one of your better known paintings of Saturn at the observatory.
Yes.
which has been on display for many years.
Oh.
It's a beautiful painting. I think you did several versions of that, or did the same painting a number of times.
Oh, I've done several a number of times.
Yeah.
In fact, there's one down there, right behind that chair.
And you've done so many Saturns.
What?
You've done so many Saturns.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the most interesting planets because it has that ring.
Yeah, I think it's everyone's favorite.
Yes.
When people
Yeah.
look at that through a telescope, they're
Want to
really
see Saturn.
pleased. Yes.
Because they found out later that Jupiter had a very slender ring. I don't know whether it shows in that photograph they sent me of Jupiter or not, but I think it does. Jupiter's that pink thing at the bottom there. And I think it shows a slight ring that you can just detect. It's a good photograph.
I think Uranus has a ring too. Uranus has a ring too.
Yes, they seem to develop rings. I want to see if the ring shows them. I suppose there are not many of those instruments in the world, so they must be pretty expensive.
About 6 weeks' pay
About
for this. 6 weeks
6?
before rent. Yeah.
Before taxes. Huh?
Yeah. Yeah, as opposed to 6 weeks take-home pay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, or spending money. Yeah. But they're becoming more popular now, more common, because they're getting smaller and less expensive. It's a video camera with a small monitor. In fact, here, I'll let you see what I'm seeing.
Oh!
See? Here. Oh. Whoa. Kill myself here. You're in front of the window, so there's a bit of glare there, but...
Oh, now you get my chest.
And let's see, focus. But see, you're silhouetted because of the backlight.
Well, take it off of me.
Okay. Now, you're very careful on the perspective on such pictures. Do you work at a 40-degree view? Is that your standard, 40 degrees?
You mean the angle of the painting?
Yes.
Just about. Because that's the angle of vision. About 40 degrees. Your normal vision is when you look straight ahead, your normal vision is about 40 degrees.
Okay.
And a camera generally takes about 38 degrees, at least my camera does. When you're taking a normal view, of course, that wide angle.
Didn't you participate in the design of that 17-mile drive?
Oh, yes.
Yes. Yes, I helped lay that out.
You laid out all the streets and...
And I wanted to put it all along the coast and no private property between the road and the coast, so that people driving down would always be able to see the ocean. And what did they do? They just didn't take the advice and the layout that I made, but they wanted to make money. So they put the road inside and then sold the coast property for fancy prices and made a hell of a lot of money, and the public don't see the coast.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not all together, but several.
You see some of it, but they spoil the idea.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the Ida rich live down there and enjoy everything and
Chesley was
have
the
every luck.
original coastal conservationist, but he didn't, his ideas didn't.
You've been over it, haven't you?
I rode my bicycle on it.
And you've seen that marble palace down there.
Yes.
One house built of marble, white marble, Carrara marble. Must have cost a fortune.
Nice houses, yes.
Yeah. Now the New York Public Library is built of marble, and I know the architect very well. And we were talking about one day, and he's disappointed because they didn't use Carrara marble. It was the kind of marble they mined somewhere up in the Sierra or someplace, and it's soft. And the moldings have begun to soften and melt.
Mm-hmm.
And Hastings, as I say, was a great friend of mine, and he was complaining about the way the things were melting. Now, the ugliest thing they did in New York City, and you remember the Knickerbocker Trust Company with the Corinthian columns? on the corner of Fifth Avenue and the cross.
I'm not familiar with New York City.
Oh. Well, anyhow, they had Corinthian columns. Well, you know what a Corinthian column looks like, with those leaves and leaves and leaves. Well, the pigeons, which are very common in New York, use those leaves for other purposes. And what did New York councilmen do? Simply took a hatchet and chopped all those marble leaves off. So it just looks like hell. All these beautiful leaves cut off. Now they could have put a very, chicken wire would have done it, and saved those capitals and kept the pigeons away. A wire bigger than chicken wire would have kept the those strips of wire, anything, but instead of chopping the leaves off. Ruin.
Tell me about the St. Peter's, which is not the way it really is.
No. I lived in Rome for a couple of weeks when I was living in Italy, and the front of St. Peter's is very ugly. Originally, Michelangelo designed it, and there were two bays, as they call the sections, further back, and he designed a beautiful building with columns in front, and the four domes, which you can see just faintly visible in that, the four domes were visible. So it was a beautiful design. And a pope that followed some time later and decided it wasn't big enough, so he built what they call two bays further out, and then put an ugly front on it. And that's the way it was when I saw it when I was living in Rome. So I decided that I'd improve it by at least tying that colonnade on each side, that big curved colonnade, by putting a pediment with columns of the same sort, Corinthian columns, in front of that ugly front, and then photograph it and send a photograph of it to the Pope.
And?
Never got an answer.
No?
But if they do that, it would look a lot better.
Well, it's not too late, is it?
I'm afraid so.
Then I stuck my names I showed you on that stone in front.
Oh, yes. Oh,
That's
yes.
buried. And I painted in the period of about 1775 or so. When they were even earlier.
Veronese style.
When they were driving that kind of coaches and stuff. I made it of a couple of centuries earlier. My name's on that stone.
Right. 1924 it says.
No, does it really? We were trying awfully hard to get the date right. Did we miss?
Is that when you were there? 24?
No, that's not right. It shouldn't be 24. It should be the year he did it, 1972 or 80. We were trying awfully hard to
Well, if I dated it, that's right.
take, let's
It's
see.
in Roman numerals.
Right.
I've forgotten how you do it. Now, see, that's 4 and that's 20, but this is
It's 50.
50, 60, 74.
1974.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, MCM would be 19. A standard question. What advice would you offer to young astronomical artists like Bob here who need advice?
Yeah. How do you really get started in the field?
Yeah, well,
You just have to make connections.
See how good they are at drawing, that's all I can say. Improve their drawing ability.
So how did you start in? Just by a portfolio, showing magazines?
I have to learn certain tricks. For instance, most of the planets, as you know, are not perfect or circular because they whirl around and that flattens them at the poles. Our Earth is some 16 miles flatter at the poles than it is at the equator because of the motion expand. So you have to teach it to draw an ellipse. And it's a simple thing to do when you know how to do it.
I think Chesley
Just make two circles,
tells
one the smaller size of the ellipse, diameter of the ellipse, and one the bigger, and then draw some lines through and through and through, and then you can easily, by using a trick, Because drawing that and dropping down and that and dropping down, you can finally approach a place where it drops right on that diameter, and you start at the pole, and then you can draw a perfect ellipse, just the way the planet is.
I think Chesley tells would-be astronomical artists to learn astronomy, but since you're at Griffith Observatory, maybe you're learning astronomy, or maybe you've already learned astronomy. That I think would be a great advantage, because a lot of these kids, I don't know what they're painting when they start to paint astronomy, because they don't know anything about astronomy.
Here's the way to do it.
Okay. Are you familiar with that technique, Bob?
No, it's new. I use different technique.
By following the intersections there, you can get a perfect ellipse, just the size you want, shape you want.
Okay, this one is the minor axis, and
Yeah.
another's the major axis.
One's a big diameter, and the other's a smaller diameter, and then that way you get. Of course, I have a machine, whatever you want to call it, in there that will draw an ellipse, but it's very limited in size.
Mm-hmm.
While this you can make as big as you please.
Okay, yeah, because your compass, you make much bigger.
Sure.
Compasses come much larger than the ellipse templates.
Yeah.
Where would you learn a technique like this? Where would you learn a technique like this?
I worked it out myself.
You did?
Yeah. I simply knew that if you drew a series of parallel lines like that in two circles, and kept doing that, you'd finally hit a number of dots that you could be sure would be the right curve.
Did you do a lot of this sort of thing in your astronomical paintings then of
I've done a lot
laying
of
things out?
astronomical paintings.
Yes.
Yeah.
But do you use a lot of different techniques like this to lay them out precisely?
I would do it even if I looked at the example.
What you do is you
Yes.
make concentric circles.
What I'm wondering is before you do a
Well, one should
A
be bigger
painting.
than the other, shouldn't
Yeah.
it?
do you have all kinds of lines drawn connecting
see.
things and getting the perspective just right, or do you
Then you figure
just
out
visualize it and then begin to paint?
What I do, I
14
generally
miles
do the
during
thing
the
on
Earth, this size
a
wouldn't
piece
even
of
show.
paper and then carefully trace it and transfer it onto the canvas.
Oh,
And
I
the kind
see,
of
yeah.
canvas I use is
Then you make little right angles
Well-
all along until you get a...
Whoa, careful, don't get in my way.
Okay, has a heavy texture.
It's very fine grained, and we pick it out very carefully because sometimes it has lines running through it.
Thread, big thread.
And since all my paintings are thin, as you can see, I don't paint on thick stuff the way some painters do. I have to be very careful about getting a smooth canvas. So, that's the way it is. And in the old days, before I could get this, I used to take this kind of cardboard such as that and spray it with shellac. And blow it on, and then scrape it down just a little bit in case it's lumpy, and then it will take paint. If you try to paint on that stuff without shellac, the paint sinks in, and it can't get a smooth blend like the sky on that picture in back of you. Yeah.
Yeah, you really get some nice effect with oil. The sort of thing that many people would try to airbrush.
Yeah, well, Chesley, what do you think of airbrushing? You know,
I
most...
never use an airbrush,
Yeah.
or as the Japanese call it when they write to me, an airpiece.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
Japanese artist corresponds with me, and he uses what he calls an airpiece. And they both around. I never tried to use it. And I think it would be much more difficult than doing what I do. I have tiny brushes here that have camel's hair bristles, and I just do that. And and tap it down carefully, and you can make a beautiful blend. That sky in back of you is blended that way.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, the airbrush seems to be becoming the standard of the space artists these days.
And Don Davis was telling us yesterday that he uses an airbrush.
He uses an airbrush. I know he does. And I put a poisonous head on a poor old corn snake that's perfectly harmless. And the rattlesnake has a triangular head. Poisonous snakes, most of them have triangular heads. I caught a rattlesnake, I think I told you, and grabbed him by the back of the head, and he was on a cliff, about the level of my hand, and I stole up behind him, and he was coiled, and grabbed him by the back of the head and put him in a box. I had a cartridge box, and I brought him back with me to Tucson, where I was staying, and I made a big mistake. I had holes in the box to keep him alive, and I was going to take him to college to the DK fraternity that I belonged to, because they had a Gila monster there crawling around on the floor, and I thought we might as well have a rattlesnake too. I mentioned it at the breakfast table, and boy, they nearly went crazy, and they made me take it out in the middle of the road and kill it with a spade, chop its head off.
Now, you really grabbed a rattlesnake with your hands?
Yeah, I grabbed it by the back of the head. It was coiled.
Do you believe that,
And
Bob?
I just,
I believe it.
Really?
Yeah, it's been done before.
He used to be able to catch a lizard easily.
Well, a lizard isn't going to hurt you if you miss.
I know. But,
well,
I don't think he really didn't think about the possibility of missing. Never crossed his
probably was a foolish thing to take a chance at, but I made it.
You did the series on the California missions.
Oh, I've got them all downstairs. I did those, and I published in a book. You've seen the book, maybe.
I've been looking for the book since I heard of that. I've never seen it.
Try Santa Barbara,
Santa Barbara.
because the Santa Barbara settings alone underwrote.
Have you ever seen the book?
I've never seen the book.
2 years later.
Chesley, let me ask you. You said last time I was here that you met Mark Twain
That I once met Mark Twain.
on the streetcar.
I went to Columbia University, and I was walking up Fifth Avenue in the morning, and Mark Twain always wore a white suit, and you could easily tell him because we used to have playing cards of great authors and all that stuff. And so when I saw him coming my way, I said to him, good morning, Mark Twain, and he said, hello, my boy, how are you? So I was speaking to Queens. Oh, well.
Anyone else from that era that you met and remember? It's
You mean
long
of
ago.
important people?
Yeah, that you saw.
Who was the poet that my father knew? Whitman.
Well, Werner von Braun was an important person. Werner von Braun, the rocket
Oh, yes,
engineer, he
yes.
was very important.
Yes.
And the assistant that I always got, Cornelius Ryan, I didn't like. He worked on it too. But he was a very disagreeable man, and always thumbing his nose at people and doing things that I didn't like. So we didn't get along at all. Now Willie Lay, I did a lot of work with Willie Lay, and he was very fine, very nice. And he had a strong German accent. And we went up Mount Hamilton together. We went a lot of places together, but he died rather young from cancer.
Didn't we take Willie Lay up Mount Tamalpais?
I think we did, yes. We took him up Tamalpais, and we have a picture somewhere of us looking over the barrier there, down at Sausalito. Yes, we took him up Tamalpais. I remember coming down, didn't we pass a lot of dead bodies where...
No.
Yes,
Two
Killed.
fellas had been car clouding, and they caught them and made them lie down in the middle of the road.
They've been doing what?
Clouding cars, stealing out of cars. Clouding.
I've not heard the term.
Car clouding. And
yeah, they weren't dead, they were handcuffed
doing it.
and lying down.
The police caught them and made them lie down in the middle of the road.
So we drove past that. I used to do a great deal of driving in that part of the day. In fact, I drove from Pasadena to Sausalito overnight, all one night driving. When I get sleepy, I just get to the side of the road, lock the
I can't
doors.
remember whether it was Willie Lay or Nishan Tour that we took up to the top of Mount Tamalpais. Might have been Nishan Tour. He was a Los Angeles sculptor. Old friend of Chesley.
When you go downstairs, on the lower shelf, on the further shelf as you get to the door out of the living room, you'll see a list about that long of yellow books in all colors, and that's the conquest of space in different nations.
Did you know Chesley had an exhibit in Japan this summer?
No, I didn't.
Oh, you didn't? Oh my goodness. Well, let's go downstairs and we'll show you. Are you through up here now?
Not just quite. There's one story I really want you to tell because I enjoy hearing it, and that's living through the earthquake
Oh,
and the
don't
fire.
get him started.
Oh, I want to.
He's been for 2 hours on there.
What did
We
you
have
want?
lots of tape on the earthquake, the
Yeah.
fire and earthquake of 1906.
Well, it happened about 5:15 in the
Let's
morning,
get some crackers and
and the
cheese.
sun,
What would you like to drink?
the sun
Soft
was
drink.
What would you like?
Soft drink, or water.
brandy and just as usual. The sun was just rising. Now, in the evening, a friend and I went to the Barbary Coast, where all the prostitutes lived, and they'd have all kinds of naughty shows and things, and we'd just look around. We didn't take any chances of monkeying with those people, but we'd just look around and see naked dances and all that kind of stuff. And I got home about 3 o'clock in the morning, and there was a little rattle, and the windows of the place next door rattled. And when I started to go to bed again, little tremors. And even in the daytime, that same day when I was working in my grandfather's wholesale paper business, because he wanted me to be a merchant, little trembles. And in the morning, about 5:15, it started to shake. I got out of bed and went to the window, and fortunately I was thrown down by the force of the earthquake, and just then the chimney that was on top of the sloping roof we had came crashing right down past the window. If I'd had my head out of that window, I'd have been killed. So I had that close an escape from being killed by that earthquake. Well, everything was silent for a minute. Then came the second jolt, and that was a big one. And then you could hear screaming all over the place. Everybody started screaming. So then I went to the back of the house, and I had difficulty opening the doors. I had to kick some open. It was quite a job. And I looked out, and we had a view over the city because we lived on the top of Mount Hill, and I had a view of the whole city. And I could see smoke starting to rise up down near the bay. And the first thing you knew, the whole area down there was on fire. Well, Dick O'Telling's whiskey warehouse was saved because the firemen got on the job and they pumped the salt water out of the bay and saved the whiskey house. And there used to be a joke around the town, God had burned our city down because it was so frisky, because of the whorehouses and everything around. But why did he burn the churches down and save O'Telling's whiskey? Well, the fire kept on coming up, and when I left my home, we had a big front garden and back garden with 2 willow trees, weeping willows growing in it in the back, and they were sweeping around, and we had a Chinese cook and an Irish nurse. And the Chinese cook saved the silver, but he left $750 in gold in his room, and things that long, brands were dropping out of the sky in flames, all burning, dropping all around us. In fact, I had to knock them away from me or someone. And it was that sort of thing dropping on all these roofs and everywhere that kept scattering the fire, scattering fire. And one of the funny sights, being fully dressed, I wanted to look it over, and I had a girlfriend, and I whistled to her, and we went together. And one of the funny sights was, as you got near the edge of the fire, rats schools of them would come running out of the basements and rush across the street and down into another basement. And that kept on until we got tired watching it. Well, the fire kept burning for 3 days until it reached Golden Gate, Venice Avenue. And Mare Island sent their dynamite experts down, and they blew the block after block after block after block on the east side of Venice Avenue, which was 100 feet wide, and sent their dynamite crews to do that. And in that way they managed to stop the fire. They brought water in tanks and fought the fire when it was down flat on the ground, and there it was stopped. In other areas it burned till it reached the foot of Twin Peaks to some place and died out because there was nothing more to burn up. But I was about 17 years old and fully dressed and enjoyed every minute of it.
And your house perished?
We saw, oh no, both houses were burned up. My house, and my aunt had a beautiful house on Bush Street near Post, and that burned up. Everything was burned up. Mm-hmm. We had burned clear out to Venice Avenue. So the Keel's boat ran free of charge to take people away that wanted to get away. And that's what we did. So that's what happened.
What personal items did you lose in the fire?
I like a damn fool, we had a billiard table downstairs and genuine ivory billiard balls. And I knew their value. And like a damn fool, I saved those billiard balls. And because I couldn't carry them around forever, I gave them somebody to take care of them. They were passed somewhere and sold, and I never saw them again.
Did you lose some of your paintings?
Everything I painted went.
Everything.
I didn't save anything. No. And so that's what happened there.
You have pretty good stamina.
Pretty good what?
Stamina.
Oh.
You look like you're feeling pretty well. You're very alert.
Yes, considering I'm 96.
Almost 96.
Almost 96. And my grandfather lived to be 98. So I have a couple of years left anyhow.
Uh-huh.
I feel all right. The only thing that I notice is my leg muscles from the knee down are a little bit weak. I notice the difference between coming up those stairs when I start at the bottom and get to the top. Mm-hmm. And my grandfather, who lived to be 98, ended up the last year of his life, which I don't want to do, on a wheelchair with a trained nurse standing behind him to take care of him. And I don't want to live long enough anything like that. I have a lot of sleeping pills. When I get to that point, I'll take the sleeping pills.
What are you painting now? What Chinese is it?
I'm making that thing up. But yes, I'm painting a picture, but it's purely imaginary.
Uh-huh.
I'm using a Chinese thing here, and a Chinese temple there. And I'm going to do something with that river. I don't like it, but I'm through the mountain and the sky, and that's all made up. And no, I reached the point. I painted as I said, that's one of the Himalayas, and I painted Mount Shasta at sunset and Mount Shasta up there, and I painted all those things in Italy and all this stuff. So now I'm just making things up like that.
You've always enjoyed the Chinese style, haven't you? Or for a long time?
Oh, and you probably saw in the bathroom a big long painting done in the Chinese style. And of course, a lot of that, well, over the fireplace downstairs in the living room, there's a painting I like very much. It's done in the Chinese style. And it's painted in colors that are supposed to match the fireplace, the brick fireplace. That is, it reflects some of the colors.
What do you like about the Chinese style?
I like their imagination. I like the Oriental style, both Japanese and Chinese. They're very fine artists. They're freer in their imagination than we Anglo-Saxons are. They can think up beautiful things, while we're taught as kids to copy nature and copy nature and copy nature. So I think it's a mistake. There's Mount Diablo, but I've copied nature. I cut out all the houses I built on the foothills, and that's a very accurate picture of Mount Diablo because I had a photograph of it taken from that angle. And I painted portraits. I painted a lot of girlfriends, and that was a wife that's dead now, and she's studying her music, as I told you before, and that's her picture in the costume. And I enjoyed painting portraits. I painted Eileen Pringle, who was a famous actress, probably before your day. You never heard of her, maybe, but
No.
anyhow.
Did you tell him about Charlie?
Charlie?
And the silverware?
Yes, Charlie was our Chinese cook.
Oh, yes.
And he was paid in gold in those far-off days, $20 gold pieces. And he saved the silver in a basket. Now we stood in the garden with the willow trees sweeping around and these flames, brands coming out of the sky. And I said to Charlie, he had a telescope basket, and I said, "Now Charlie, have you got everything you want?" And he nodded, yes. We went away. He told me later, about a couple of days later, where we'd taken refuge in the home of my aunt. I lose the money. I said, "What'd you lose?" I said, "I lose him $750. I said, "What'd you have in that bag?" I saved him silver. An honest Chinese saved all the family spoons and put it away and took it and left his own gold in his room. Well, I said, "Well, never mind, Charlie, we go back in." And we went back about a week later. I had to get a permit from the police chief, which I got easily. Threw the bricks away where the foundation part of the house was laid with brick, and where his room was, and sure enough,
Those crackers are delicious.
a great pile of Mexican silver, because the Chinese knew that the Mexicans had pure silver dollars. And since they wanted to get their money back to China, and our silver dollars were merely plated with silver, as you probably know. And
I think there was more silver than silver dollars.
I said, "Well, never mind, son." So I took his silver dollars over to the mint and asked them to give me its value in gold. So they gave me its value in gold pieces, $20 gold pieces. They didn't have paper money around in that far of a day, or I'd have taken paper money. So I wrapped the gold pieces up in common wrapping paper for him, and rubber bands and tape and everything, and so he could put them in his pocket, because I couldn't go with him, because the next day I was leaving in the Vice President of Southern Pacific's private car to go to college. And the Vice President of Southern Pacific had a beautiful private car, and he was
That
going
came later.
to college.
Didn't he go over to Oakland and Piedmont and stay with your other aunt over in Piedmont?
Could be.
I think he did.
Yes, I watched the fire burn up the city from Piedmont. That was it.
And Charlie
So I could see the whole city blazing. It had a beautiful view of this home of my aunt in Piedmont. It had a beautiful view of the whole Bay region. So I watched the whole city burn up. And it burned for 3 days. And then later I went over, climbed up, because it was against the law. They'd established a police line. And we got on launch and paid $5 or $6, good money in those days, to take us over, and we crawled up through a hole in the wharf and got in the city. And then we explored around among the ruins, saw all we could. And for a while, when my grandfather re-established, and a couple of weeks later, a galvanized iron shed to start the business again, I actually have to hold my nose to walk to the place. The stench of the dead people around was so bad. I tell you, that was a mess. And the stink was awful. That's a bridge I designed
That's
that I wanted them to use in New York, and I sent it to them, to the city fathers, and they wouldn't accept it. Now that bridge is 90 feet wide.
90
And they
feet
could
wide.
have had traffic 90 feet so that they could have traffic going two ways. Now they're in a mess. They built that narrow bridge, and it's 45 feet wide, and they can't handle the traffic going from Staten Island to New York back and forth. And I also designed it so that they could use the underside of the bridge and build a lane on that. It's strong enough to handle.
That's the bridge over the Narrows.
The Verrazano Narrows?
Yeah, the narrows between Staten Island and New York City.
Is that where it is?
Yeah.
I'm not very familiar with New York.
And I swiped the three cable design from Germany. They have a three cable bridge. And well, I sent it to the city fathers. They had nothing to do with it. They built it their
That
own.
was printed in Coronet magazine.
I think so, yeah.
And the lady to the left?
If they built that bridge the way I designed it, they
Well,
wouldn't
that's
have
the
the
stripper
trouble
on the
they're in
half
now.
show. That's what one of our friends said when she came up. Streaker. Remember the streakers?
The streakers?
When
Sure.
when people were streaking, well, she looked at it and she said, "Oh, streaker on the half show."
And while Botticelli's painting of Venus is worth more than mine at present, the fact I gave her a pearl shell to stand on instead of his ordinary old clam shell will make mine more valuable in the 20th century.
He does have the advantage of you in time, doesn't he?
Yes, it really does.
And the pink ship?
The flying ship
Yes.
is going to the South Pole. It's on the right
No,
angle
no,
at San Diego.
no, the one in the Carmel.
Oh, that's a swipe from, you may have read a book called Moby Dick, ever?
Oh, yes.
You heard of it?
Oh, yes.
No? Well, I stole the flagship in Moby Dick and put it on my own ocean. And it seems to be much happier there because it's in color and the rising moon is behind it. And I stole that ship from Moby Dick. It's an old-fashioned sailing vessel which you don't see anymore.
Mm-hmm. You don't remember ships like that, do you?
Don't do what?
You don't remember ships like that, do you? Because you've got the painting downstairs that's of the early bay with the old
Oh
ships in it.
yeah, I got that from a map I had of San Francisco in 1850.
49?
But not 49, they made a map in 50. But my grandfather told me that very little building was done the first year because they had to get the lumber cut and do a lot of work. And all they had was what the Indians had built of adobe. So
Did the
that
Indians build
painting
it?
downstairs,
Oh, yes, that's right. The mission.
they didn't
The
have
mission
any
was
cut
there.
lumber
That's
in
right. The
49.
mission was there first, of course.
So that's the way that happened. Now the bridge angle, the three cables I stole from Germany, the three cables, and widened the bridge.
Now that old painting in that old ship in the middle,
That's a
there,
whaling vessel being about to be cut up because they stopped taboo on hunting whales. And in
That's in
this
the
country, they're still
Alameda.
hunted in Japan.
that's in the Alameda estuary.
Yes, and it's about to be cut up, and one's already in the dry dock going to be cut up. You can see it way up on the side there. And that's the Alameda Estuary. And I made an etching downstairs from a drawing that I made on the spot.
I thought you just said
So it's very accurate. What?
you did the etching on the spot.
Well, maybe I did, but I guess I had to. You cover the copper plate with a thin coating of wax and then take a needle and draw. And in those days I could draw a much steadier hand than I can today. So I did the etching, and the etching's downstairs, and then I did the painting from the etching. Because I always liked the composition and was interested in the subject. And I like that color of green I used. And I don't follow illustrating very much. I paint things the way I please. So that's the way it is.
Are you painting anything astronomical any longer?
No, I feel I've done all I can astronomically. The last thing I painted was that Saturn down there.
Like Charles Rollo Peters, who was famous for painting the missions by moonlight.
Yes.
He painted all 21 missions from all 4 sides. He said, that's all there is.
So that's the last astronomical painting I did.
So no more?
Looking down and saying, no, I feel I've done all I can, and I enjoy doing landscapes like this, so I'm lucky with things like this.
Well, sure. I understand you don't get along well with artists in general. Is that true?
You what?
With artists? That you don't get along well with artists?
No, certainly not.
That's not true.
They're all lousy as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, there must be some good ones.
Oh,
Don Davis is doing very nice work with
but you don't expect an artist to admire another artist, except the ancient artists. I like Velasquez very much. I think Michelangelo is not only a great architect, a great painter, but a great sculptor, and we never have had his equal since.
What is it that you don't like about artists?
They're
Or
too
their work.
vain,
You know,
and they think they're good when they're lousy. You know, the modern artists, they can paint a bunch of red and black and red and blue, and then they call it modern art. And they, few of them, the modern artists, can draw well, and those that draw very well become mere illustrators like Rockwell, what's his name, Norman Rockwell?
Yes.
He's an illustrator, and he's a very good illustrator, but he doesn't paint in color as far as I know, and he has no imagination.
oh, yes,
He doesn't create.
he didn't play. He
What?
paints in color, honey.
He what?
He does lots of color paint, that's
Well,
all.
whatever they are, they're just copies of stuff you see every day. But then, as you well know, I don't like any artist except myself. And the ancients. They have to be dead about 200 years before I begin to admire them. Just as I admire the Taj Mahal, been dead a long while, the architect of that. And I've heard he was an Italian. The design for the Calcutta people of the India.
It's true.
That's the way it is.
Bob, we've taken up a lot of these people's time. We have.
Good.
Too bad.
We appreciate all that.
Bob, were there any questions that you wanted to ask Chesley that we... I'm thinking of doing an article for the Griffith Observer on this.
Be sure you send us a couple.
Oh, of course, of course. Of course.
Although I'm an atheist, cemeteries are supposed to be sacred ground. Once you're down there and buried, you're supposed to stay there forever. In fact, I went to the funniest thing ever happened to me. I used to go around through Laurel Hill Cemetery because my father said I had a morbid curiosity, which I did as a little kid, wondering what life was and what death was. And I stood by an open grave while the Japanese were burying one of their relatives. And of all things in the world, it was funny to hear the Japanese sing Onward Christian Soldiers or Farewell something, sing an American or an English hymn of after death. And they all sang it while the coffin was lowered down, and then the grave diggers filled it up.
Was that in California?
That was down, yeah, in California.
Well, they were becoming anglicized, I guess.
Out of Laurel Hill Cemetery in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And now all that is gone. The Laurel Hill Cemetery was grabbed by real estate developers, and that beautiful cemetery, which should be preserved as they do in New York, gone. Holy Cross Cemetery is gone. The whole business, they just gave away the money and destroyed all the things that would be beautiful relics of early San Francisco. Mm-hmm. Terrible thing, great mistake. That's the way it happens here. In New York, they show more sense. In fact, there's a cemetery called Greenwood Cemetery that I've visited. It's quite beautiful.
What have you enjoyed most about the astronomical paintings that you've created? What aspect of that have you enjoyed the most?
I guess the stuff I painted in Boston.
The big murals?
Yeah, long panorama, and various things that I did in Boston. Because you get to a point finally where you do Saturn there and there and there and there and there and there, and what more can you do? So finally you feel you painted everything in astronomy that you can possibly do. Details of the moon, as you go out the door and look by the side of the door, you'll see 4 machines or 3 machines descending on the moon, and it's very, very accurately and carefully laid out the moon surface at that point where they're going to land in a certain crater. I did all that careful work when I was a kid, and I feel that I've done all that I can and that sort of thing, so I enjoy doing this kind of stuff now. Mm-hmm. And, my hand is still steady enough to paint this kind of stuff.
Do you feel that all these space probes that have been sent out recently have taken away from the imagination of the space artists? Or do you think it's enhanced
I found a lot of difference, because that picture of Saturn and Titan is all wrong from every point of view. Saturn, the Titan, doesn't have that kind of atmosphere at all. It's very different. It's a kind of a yellowish gas, it's very poisonous, from what they report, the last thing I heard. So that you couldn't see Saturn from Titan if you were on there. From, what's the name of that planet, that red planet?
Titan.
The red planet.
Oh, Mars.
That's...
No, you had it right. Saturn from Titan. That's correct.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's a satellite of
Titan.
Titan. It's a satellite of Saturn.
Yeah, that's right.
And it is red, but and they reported it as red, but I thought they meant the rocks, so I painted them red. But later it turns out that the whole atmosphere is reddish yellow, and you couldn't see Saturn from Titan if you tried. It wouldn't be possible. And it's a poisonous gas.
Yes, a methane gas, primarily.
Yeah. So that
Chesley
picture's all wrong.
Chesley feels he was lucky to be able to exploit Saturn from Titan. Before they discovered they probably couldn't see it. He said he got a lot of mileage out of it before they discovered that.
Oh yeah, I love those were printed. Not my idea, but my publicity manager printed a lot of them. They've all been sold, I guess. They're all wrong.
Quite a few.
Yeah.
But they look nice.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
Very aesthetic.
Bob Richardson said that was one of the favorite pictures that he he would project down, did Bob work at Griffith? It was Griffith, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. He said everybody just loved that painting.
Yeah, we have taken your paintings of Saturn from Titan, and we use those in the planetarium regularly.
That's good.
About once every year we use them for a program that lasts about 4 months.
Oh, wow.
So they're still used.